In my last video, I talked about different types of bites, or in general, offensive weapons, but mainly about bites and bite effectiveness and etc. So I decided to do a video on defenses, the different type of defensive adaptations different animals can have. And for that, I think let's analyze the different type of armors different animals can have. So primarily in the modern day, we see only three types of armors. This is primarily about vertebrates and mainly about land animals. This can apply to a degree to the ocean animals as well, but mainly to land and maybe freshwater animals. That's where it applies. So, and obviously on vertebrates. So there are mainly three types of armor we see different animals having, and let's go over those. So first one is thick skin. Usually large animals have these, really large animals have these, like rhinos, walruses, elephants, hippos, elephant seal, others like that. Sometimes some big cetaceans also have these. Then there is obviously the fur. By the way, anything I say about the fur here also applies to the feathers. They are very similar in their functionality. Like, yes, there's some difference, like feather helps in flight a bit better, but other than that, for the purposes of this video, they're very similar. So fur is usually common in colder climate animals, and it can be seen in a lot of different mammals, like bears and sheep, and as well feathers can be seen in birds. And thirdly, there are solid scales. So like proper scales could be in pangolins, could be in crocodiles, which have not only scales but also scutes, which are like bony scutes, like osteoderms. And apart from that, also like Komodo dragons to a degree have this, but Komodo dragon is more akin to like thick skin than actual proper osteoderms. It's more like chainmail, so it's not solid armor. So Komodo dragons are a bit of an exception of the bunch, but other than that, uh, you can also find like a lot of smaller animals like tortoises, turtles, as well as horned lizards, etc. have solid scale armor. So let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of these different type of defenses. Firstly, the thick skin. Now, because most thick-skinned animals are very big, they also have somewhat of an immunity to crushing bites because they're so big that predators or contemporary predators, I should say, or predators of their time, have a hard time grabbing their entire leg or entire body or entire head into their mouths and squishing it. Like, there is no way, let's say, a bear can ever hope to bite the leg off of a live rhino, or bite the head of a live rhino and crush it. It's just too big and too thick. And even the middle portion of the body, because the skin is so thick, the bone crushing bite, all it does is just grab the skin because it is a mouthful. Like, they just bite and they have a mouthful of skin, which, because the bone crushing bites have stubby teeth, cannot penetrate and essentially deals very little damage. So that's what this type of you can say defenses are useful for. However, it is vulnerable to slashing attacks. Now, granted, singular slashing attacks might not be super effective against it because these are so thick that the very non-committal type slashing attacks usually only have like a little bit of a skin cut, which is not a big deal for such a big animal. But if multiple cumulative attacks happen in the same area, eventually this can start bleeding, and this essentially doesn't provide any immunity to it, any advantages against it. So there's that problem. And also, it doesn't provide any protection against piercing attacks. So, this is why piercing fangs have a really easy time getting through thick skin and dealing damage to vital areas. Let's look at the next type of defenses, which is the fur. Now, obviously, fur gives a lot of cold protection. So, if it's really, really cold out there, it can protect from cold. Same with feathers as well. They protect from cold. And now, what about the resistances? Fur is really good against slashes because hair follicles, while they are flexible, they are actually resistant to slashing. This is why it's very difficult to cut your hair with a knife, but it's rather easy to cut it with a, let's say, something like a scissor. But even then, you have to slowly cut it. You cannot just slash at your hair and cut it effectively. So, similar situation here is hair follicles are rather strong material, and like there are different types of fur based armor, like the bears have like the woolly coat, same with mammoths, as well as different sheeps can have woolly coats as well. And these are somewhat resistant to slashing bites. Now obviously size difference would matter quite a bit. Like if it's a massive animal like a shark biting on a hairy animal like a sheep, that's not going to do much. But if it's a comparable sized animal, like let's say dromaeosaurid or some other similar sized dinosaur biting onto the hairy body of another animal, they will have quite a difficult time cutting through all of that hair. However, this type of defense is very vulnerable to piercing damage because hair follicles are flexible. So with minimal pressure, they move aside and clear a path for piercing fangs to get through them. And this is why you see a lot of the Ice Age prey animals have very woolly coats, but the top predators of Ice Age, other than humans, like the Smilodon, didn't have much difficulty getting through their defenses. And even you can see in the example of humans as well. Humans evolved spears to get through these woolly animals because piercing is very efficient going against it. It's slashing isn't. In fact, humans also understood this, and later on, using wool, they made an armor called gambeson. So gambeson was very preliminary or like first layer of defense, you can say, was for the poor man's armor, and it was actually surprisingly effective at stopping sword slash. So slashing it stopped pretty well, but when it comes to piercing or thrusting, gambeson provided very little defense against it. So same case is applied here as well. Same ideas will be applied here as well, is that it's not good against piercing. At the same time, it's also not very good against crushing bites because hair is not something solid. It can be compressed very easily because hair follicles are also very flexible, so they can also be compressed together very tightly under pressure. And due to this, the extreme bite forces of, let's say, a large predator like a bear or a hyena can easily compress the fur and get to the bones of it, essentially. Let's look at the next type of armor, which is the scales, osteoderms, or in general, I like to call them solid armor. So, this is not flexible stuff like skin or fur. This is solid, this is rigid armor. Obviously, this type of armor restricts mobility, but at the same time, this is the strongest type of armor an animal can have. Like obviously there are variations of it, like there are like turtle shells, as well as there are like osteoderms on the body like ankylosaurids had, and different type of you could say the crocodilians have, as well as the chainmail type osteoderms for the Komodo dragons, though they're not too much in this category. They don't provide as much protection as these crocodilian or ankylosaurid ones, or even like some cases pangolin, armadillo. All of them have these type of defenses. Now these type of defenses are pretty much immune to slashing attacks. Like unless the attacking animal is massive in comparison, like a shark biting on a small sea turtle. Other than that, no, this slashing attacks just don't work on them. It's too hard, too solid, and slashes just cannot penetrate it. It is also highly resistant to piercing attacks. Now, granted, there are cases where with some piercing can happen in rare instances between the gaps, or maybe there is some special piercing fangs which are designed to go through it, or certain animals have specific type of bites to get through armor with their long fangs, like for example jaguars and tigers do with crocodiles. They have figured out a way to bite crocodiles in a way that they can pierce their skulls essentially, or the neck, depending upon which species. Jaguars go for the skulls, tigers usually go for the neck. But also, this type of armor is only vulnerable to crushing damage. So, crushing bites of a T-Rex usually is the way to go. However, a few caveats here is that yes, this is vulnerable to crushing damage, but only when the animal has like a massive mouth that can engulf the entire target. So in this case, let's imagine an ankylosaurid. So it's not like a hyena can go and bite through the ankylosaurus's armor. No matter how much bite force you give it, it simply cannot do that because of how big the animal is. But a T-Rex being massive can engulf the whole head into its mouth and crush it. So that can work. Now, you might be wondering, I'm talking only about bite type attacks, or to a degree also slashes, like claw slash, etc., can also work in this case. But what about other attacks, right? And while a lot of herbivores do piercing damage, like for example the goring horns of a bull, the rhino, or the tusks of an elephant, all of these are goring weapons, so they basically work similar to piercing damage. So there's that. And a lot of the herbivores also prefer blunt force trauma. So either with kicks, with head bashes, with body slams in some cases, all of it is blunt force trauma. And usually there is no surefire way to defend against blunt force trauma from a much bigger animal. So this is why I did not include any armors which can protect, uh, let's say, target from this blunt force attack, like a head bash or something like that. Thick skin to a degree can, but then again, it will eventually, with the momentum, can reach the bones and break bones. So far, there is no definitive answer towards it. However, some animals have some cases which not always work, but sometimes work. Like, for instance, the big cats are so light on their feet and the center of gravity is a bit off. So, due to that, whenever some large animal bashes into them, instead of the force being transferred to their bones and breaking it, due to them having flexible bones and very light on feet, they get flung away. This is why you will see very many videos of big cats like lions or some cases leopards being flung away by a big herbivores and being fine, because they have flexible joints and flexible bones which allow them to resist impact to a degree. Now granted, this is not a guaranteed defense. This is why I kind of did not include that in this particular video. But that's one of the methods animals sometimes use to defend against blunt force attacks. However, keep in mind, flexible bones doesn't necessarily prevent crushing bites from breaking those bones. It makes it more difficult, sure, but it doesn't prevent it altogether. So I hope it was educational and enjoyable. Thank you for tuning in, and as always,